Here's an old BSR, I think it's a UA8 or something. I think it's out of a Pye black box, because I've got the turntable and I've got the amp section to fix. Now the turntable's in a bit of a bad state because it doesn't have a cartridge, and the motor is hanging out the bottom. It's lost its mounting, the rubber grommets, etc. It's all floppy and horrible. But the rest of it, I hope, I haven't taken the top off for a look at the wheel. Hopefully it's going to be alright. I'm going to have to find a cartridge for this. I've got the two mountings there, some bits of wiring left here. Now I've fixed this black box. The capacitor was completely dead, so I've wired in a couple of modern capacitors in place of the two sections. I've also replaced some of the capacitors that go in the high voltage part down here. Sometimes this tone control goes, so it doesn't work. Tone control is not working, broken. The on-off switch is fine, but the tone control itself doesn't do anything because the track's broken. I'm going to try and fix it. As you can see, it's very difficult to get it out, right pain. And also some of the other components I'm changing to try and make it better. So it's annoying when these things take quite a bit of work. I've taken the pot out, this old burnt out one which I use for spares, and I can replace, this one works, the one that was in it didn't work, and I've cleaned this and greased it up. I can reassemble it and put it back in. Okay, I finished this one. I've fixed the tone control now. Actually does about as much as it would have done when it was new. It adds treble when you turn it that way. It changes the feedback from the speakers, so it's not quite normal. They always use these dual pots with some sort of frequency compensation due to the volume. I thought it was over complicated really for what it was used for. It's a bit scratchy, I need to clean it a bit more, but it goes quite loud now, but the sound is not brilliant. It's mono of course, so I'll look into that a bit more. Anyway, it's working. There's another one I fixed which is finished now, so that's what they look like. I'm just playing the mono, so I just take it off of there now as a source input, just stick it in the back. As you can see, voltage selector, gramophone output, speaker and pickup go into that. 4 valves. So I'll look at that a bit more later on, and I've got to take this apart and have a look at mounting the motor properly before we can do anything else, and then get a, if that's alright, get a cartridge of some form or other in it. That's the motor removed. Undo the clips, the E-clips etc. that holds it in on the other side, and you can get it out. 3 supports, got some washers. These are the old atrophied, they're like big O-rings. They were originally quite soft, so it's just a matter of seeing if you can find any. I've got plenty of O-rings here. Make sure they're quite soft, not rock hard, and they might do the job. While we're underneath, you can clean up all this and re-grease any of this that's necessary before we put it back together again. The motor itself, the shaft, it's got a lot of play, but don't worry about that. You can put a bit of oil on it, just make sure it's clean. I had to undo the 2 connectors from the switch. Wires are pretty short, but they're okay once it's back in position. Going to use a combination of grommets. I've got these blanking ones, but they're quite soft, and I've made a hole in the middle, and it makes a much more sort of suspension movement, a bit softer than using the solid a proper grommet with a hole in it, which is doesn't compress very well. But I have put one of these softer ones in there, so I'm going to do it in two parts, fit them in the hole, one grommet in there, a fairly thin one, and one of these on there. Just fits nicely. It does give some compression movement and a bit of movement for the vibration. 3 grommets on the motor, and the grommets fitted into the holes that were in the top. You can see someone's painted this with like a brush or something at some point in the other. It's painted the whole thing in a sort of a cream colour. Doesn't look too bad, but I guess I could have sprayed it maybe. Motor's back in, put the clips on. It's got a little bit of movement, not too tight. Underneath you can see a bit of suspension movement. There are the 2 wires. Just got to go back on the switch. I hope the switch still works. Get all this clean. Terminals for the cartridge would just be in mono, so I've probably got a stereo cartridge, so I'll wire it up for mono. The wheel is going to need some work on it. It's over here, I think. It's even got some paint on it. I just clean the wheel up, the surface, make sure it's nice and grippy. Clean the inside of this up, the gears are okay. And just make sure this is moving properly. Just grind the glaze off the surface of the rubber wheel, just a small amount, just so that it's nice and rubbery. The grease on this thrust race, which supports the turntable, when it turns, is really gummed up bad. It's much too thick, so I just need to take that off and clean it up. Luckily it's the one with the balls that are held in the plate. Normally they fall out and sometimes they get lost, so I need to clean that up and put some decent grease on it. That thrust race was totally seized, the balls weren't going around at all, which means that there'll be drag when it's rotating. And there's all the gunge on the bottom thrust race plate, which I'm going to clean off in some solvent. I had to dig all the grease out of those on this one to get the balls turning. Now these actually move. They rest on this thrust plate, which I'll clean all this grease off. Nice slippery grease, nice clean working thrust race. Put the top pressure plate on, so when that put the turntable back in, it will turn nicely on that. Reassemble the deck after doing the motor mount, the rubber wheel, cleaning and lubing, checking everything over. Not the cartridge yet. This is the speed selector. It's working nice. It's got a neutral position where the rubber wheel is not pressing on anything. It's supposed to put it in that position to prevent a dent. If you leave them in these other positions, it still could be pressing on the capstan, which can cause a dent if you leave it on there ages. 45, 78. We'll leave it on 45. The arm, when it's up, of course, you've got it'll keep playing. And this size selector over here, I'm going to leave it down. Let's just check it out. On it just runs normally. Then lift that up, I think it have a record on now. Let's try it again. There's no size selected, so it's going over to the 45. Should be there. When it gets to the middle, it will auto return. And it should, it goes again because we still got the arm up. So let's put the arm down. It should stop. It's the arm says no more records. Off. That's good. Let's just check the size selector. If it's got a 33, and knock that down. So let's do that. Let's push that down. Yep, there. That goes. We'll check that position when we got the cartridge in. That's in the right place. Let's put that down. Return. And off. Onto the cartridge. Find something to put in. I fitted an SC12M, new old stock cartridge, which I find is pretty good sound, one of the best for this type of old ceramic cartridge. Unfortunately, the output is very low, and this deck was not meant for such a low millivolts, probably meant for something at least 250 to 400. And also this is stereo, and this deck is completely mono amp. Anyway, what I've done is I've wired it up for mono, fitted it in, luckily with a bracket. You have to have the mounting bracket, otherwise it's very difficult to fit in. Set the playing weight at about 4 grams. They recommend 2 to 6, 2 I find a bit low. And now the amp didn't have enough sensitivity. The volume would be very low with that cartridge, but there's a couple of circuit mods you can do to increase the sensitivity without affecting the quality very much. This R5, you can bypass it with a 1 microfarad capacitor, which although it affects the feedback, it puts the volume up a lot. And I've replaced some other components in here that tend to wear out, especially the mains. Capacitor was completely gone. I've put some modern ones in to replace that, and the high voltage ones, they always need to be replaced. And it's worked out pretty good. The volume's loud enough now, and everything works. I've connected it up, and I'll just do a test. Let's put in about 235 volts. This is an old single by the Eagles, not the American Eagles. I think they were an English group. The connections on the back. They've got the special plugs that this come with to connect it together. Some mono connector there. You've got that rather dangerous mains connector for the turntable. It's a voltage selector. And normally the loudspeakers in the deck cabinet will plug in there. I've got the 2 wires off to a speaker under the bench. This deck's all working now. It's pretty much as good as I can get it. So it goes very loud now, and the treble control cuts the treble right off. So that's worked really well. It goes as loud, very, very loud now. Before the mods, it was weak and horrible. And this cartridge, the SC12M, is I recommend it. When I do these old decks, it's the only one I fit in if I can. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to fit in the head. It's got a stereo, or you can get stereo 78, as this does 78s as well. If you want to play old 78s, it does that as well. And of course, this will return. It all works now, shuts off. I'll just put an LP on as well, show you working with that. An old music for pleasure from 1970 Georgie Fame, set it to 33. Show it. Wouldn't normally bang it down with an LP, but this one does it. A little bit of volume. Of course it goes, there's a treble off and up, and it goes very loud. It's not a bad sound, it's got full bass, treble. Some of these, this Music for Pleasure disc is actually recorded at quite a low level. It's quite a quite quiet disc, so the fact that it can do quite loud volume is excellent. Just got to put the back on that, and the combo's really finished. On-off switch works. Sometimes they break, but this one's fine. The lamp goes off.